Hello everyone, this is our final presentation for TeamL. Just a quick reminder, our project choice was social networking and healthcare, for which we designed a user-centered interface for a hospital system which allows imaging scans to be archived and managed. I'm going to start this presentation by showing our latest UI prototype. This system has many different users, so we designed our prototype to have different interfaces for each user. This is our login view, which allows for the user to select their department or affiliation based on the credentials they've received. A user can sign up for the system by invitation only. You must be emailed your credentials. A patient does not have to set up an account if they do not want to. It is available for their convenience. This is the patient portal. This is what the patient would be allowed to see after logging into the system. This is specifically the Service tab, which contains navigation buttons for different services offered to the patient. The navigation buttons are simple, clean, and modular, making the system easy to navigate. This is still the patient portal, and this is a view of the scheduling functionality of the system. This is if the patient wanted to make an appointment, they would click on the Appointment tab and select a date which they desired. When the date is selected, a list of available times would be generated, and when the patient selected one, they would be added to the schedule. This is another view of the patient portal, which is a list of patient care providers. This is simply accessed by the patient clicking on the Your Doctors tab. This allows for quick access to the physician contacts. This is the receptionist view, which allows the receptionists to schedule patients, check-in patients, and check-out patients. When a patient is checked in, they are updated on the daily schedule, and when they are checked out, they are removed from the daily schedule. The receptionist has limited access to patient medical information. By controlling access to patient information, we are trying to design our system to be HIPAA compliant. This is a view the nurse would see when accessing information about their current patient. The nurse has the ability to schedule patients and look over patient health records and make notes on the patient's records when needed. This is the tab view for when the receptionist or nurse needs to add a patient to the system. As you can see, there are text boxes to input basic patient information as well as enter quick triage notes. This is the tab view for when the receptionist or nurse needs to schedule the patient for an imaging scan. This view contains only essential information needed to set up an imaging appointment. This is the tab view for when the user wants to search for a particular patient. This would be one way for the hospital staff to efficiently locate patient information in the system. This is the tab used in order to request copies of imaging scans. This is used to get scans from the hospital in either print out or CD format. This is the tab view that would allow for the users, such as a doctor or a radiologist, to see what the imaging schedule looks like. The user can click on a certain day and see what patients are scheduled for that particular day. When a patient's ID is selected, a quick overview of the patient information will be given. This view is of the patient's main record. This is the view a user with appropriate privileges would see after clicking on a patient ID, possibly after searching in the system for that patient. This gives the user an overview of the patient's results, and if the user wants to see the images, then they can simply click the button Imaging and would be taken to the main imaging view. This is the main imaging view, which can be accessed from the Patient Records UI. This allows for a user with sufficient privileges to view all scans and get an overview of the findings and diagnosis. The user has an option to generate a detailed report by simply clicking on the Report button. This is the detailed report page, which can be accessed by the main imaging UI. This is a detailed report on the patient's imaging results, as well as an overview of the patient's medical history pertaining to the scans. This is the radiology technician's view, which allows for the radiology technician to view the patients scheduled for imaging and view tasks for the day. The radiology technician is responsible for uploading all images to the system, which can be accessed by the Upload tab. This is a view of the Upload tab. This tab allows for the radiology tech to upload imaging scans to the system, which can be accessed from the main imaging view. This is the Messaging tab, which allows for hospital staff to communicate with each other. Here they can leave notes and information about patients as well as reminders for the imaging department and for the radiology technician. Here is a view of what the radiologist at the hospital would see when accessing patient scans. The radiologist can view all the patient scans and report their final diagnosis. This is the view for the doctor. They can see tasks they need to complete and see a list of patients who have had recent scans. They can click directly on a patient's ID to view their imaging results. Here is the Help page. A user can access this page by clicking on the Help button located on all the UI pages. And finally, when a user is finished using the system and has logged out, they will be taken to the logout confirmation page. It is the final UI for our latest prototype. We have a total of 21 user interface views for the system represented in our final prototype.
When we launch the prototype, what we're presented with is the initial login screen. From here, we are able to select our department or affiliation, and when we click the drop-down box, we're allowed to select between patient, doctor, radiology, radiology tech, nurse, or receptionist. We'll start by selecting doctor. We will enter the doctor's username. We will then enter the doctor's password. And if these credentials are authentic, we will log in successfully. And what we're presented with is the doctor's landing page, which starts on the Patients tab. Now from here, the doctor can select another drop-down box, which is the available patients. And we can go down and we can select, let's do Alyssa Campanelli. And when we select Alyssa Campanelli, we see that she's added to recent patients. This is convenient because each time that a new patient is selected, they're added to the recent patients box to allow the doctor to save some time and not have to go back and search through the giant drop-down list again. There could be potentially thousands of patients there. Now for each patient, you'll see on the right a tasks box. And what this does is it allows the doctor to sort of set reminders that they need to check their chart, possibly reorder medication for them, or confirm surgery appointment. And ideally, when paired with a back-end database, this would be unique for each user. And we can demonstrate the recent patients functionality again by going in and just randomly selecting another user, clicking on them, and showing that they are displayed in the recent patients box. The next tab over is the Schedule tab, and this is a basic calendar functionality for the doctor. He's allowed to kind of plan out and see ahead what's coming for the day, what's coming for the week, and it allows him to schedule events far in advance or maybe for that day and click through and view today's events, like I said, or see the future events. If we click over on the Messages tab, this is a basic mailbox. He can check his inbox. He can see what he sent, maybe check messages from other doctors. Maybe IT has sent out some notices. It allows him to keep in touch with the other hospital staff in a very organized manner. There's some help functionality if maybe he doesn't understand a part of the user interface. There's a home button which will take him back to the Patients tab. And if he's done, he can click Log Out. And let's try another user from here. Let's log in as a nurse. So we would enter the nurse's username. We would enter a valid password for this user. And if these credentials, again, were authentic, we would click the login button. And what we would end up with is the nurse's landing page. And this is the current patient tab. In this case, it's patient Jane Doe. And we made an itemized list of text boxes and labels that show all of the demographics of this patient, because getting patients mixed up and keeping them separated is extremely important in hospitals. Everybody's heard a horror story of a hospital mix-up, and we wanted to avoid this and make sure that the nurses also had that information available to avoid this. The patient's doctors are listed, the radiologist is listed, the patient's specific ID is listed, their room number, their date of birth, and their gender are all listed plainly at the top. And some current events, the patient obviously just had an x-ray done, so there's an image that popped up that shows their left ankle. The radiologist notes are saying that there's multiple stress fractures, and the nurse can get this information and maybe pass it on to the doctor, or will know to go inform the patient of what's going on. And then the nurse can also add notes to say that the patient is in ER room number 3 waiting x-ray review. And this goes along with exactly what was there before. They know that they need to go inform the patient of what happened and inform the doctor of the results. If we click over to the Add Patients tab, the nurse can assign new patients to herself. Maybe the patient got moved to her floor or is now under her care. And you'll see that this drop-down box is identical to the one that was used for the Doctors tab, and as it should be. It's patients that are in the hospital. If we move over to the Scheduling tab, again, we're presented with an identical interface that the doctor had. And this was reused for modularity to save us time in coding and implementation. And it provides identical functionality. We can select dates, and we can assign tasks, we can plan for future events, and we can check for current events. If we click over to the Messages tab, again, we reused some interface code and to save time. It's the same mailbox functionality, and it allows the nurse to communicate with the rest of hospital staff in the same manner that the doctor did. Now, the nurse has the same access to the help functionality, to the home button that will take her back to the current patient page. And when she's finished and done for the day, and maybe she needs to leave and go do her rounds, she would click the log out button and would be presented back with the main login screen. And she could log in as nurse, or another user could come and log in to their respective department or affiliation. We completed a total of 3 prototypes, solved over each iteration based on the feedback we received, which is displayed here, along with how we made improvements based on this feedback. A feedback question was, how does the login differentiate between the different users? We address this by updating the login UI to allow the user to select their relevant department or affiliation. Another question was posed, what does the radiologist button do? The radiologist button generates a detailed report, so we created a UI sample that would show the report. Next, how is a scan added to the system? The radiology tech is responsible for uploading the images to the system and is the only user with access to the Upload tab. Next, the buttons are nice for the patient portal and make it easy to navigate, but please make sure that they stand out so that all users can see them. We addressed this concern by making sure that the buttons were more visible by altering their style, color, and font. These are just a few of the modifications we made based on the feedback received, but it was indicative of how the entire application evolved via the feedback processes. Now, for iteration 3, some of the feedback that we received was that users liked the overall look, users liked that the system is easy to read and navigate, but we were asked, what is the box that says Receptionist View on the Receptionist UI? And it was also requested that we distinguish which doctor it is for the doctor's name. Our project has followed the UCD processes for each iteration. We feel that every iteration allowed us to get a greater insight into the project, and we learned a lot from every iteration. Our group feels that our prototype has changed immensely and has improved greatly over each iteration. We're very happy with our final prototype, and we feel that we successfully converged on a final design solution. We expect that our design is solid and should not change too much if we were to begin implementation. These are the techniques that our group employed during our iterations. Most of these techniques were very helpful during these iterations. Each technique served a different purpose and helped us to improve our design. Personas gave us an understanding of our users. Prototypes gave us insight into how our design would look. Walkthroughs allowed us to understand how our users would actually use the system, and polling allowed for each group member to give their opinion on the design decisions. The only technique that was not as helpful as it could have been was the clickable prototype. And this was mainly because we could not get Pencil to export the HTML correctly to fully use the linking and show the flow of our system. As far as project status goes, we feel that we are exactly where we need to be. We've completed 3 successful iterations and are very happy with our final prototype. Some risks that we faced were, of course, time, as time is always a factor when completing a project of this size, and the other risk was making sure that we have covered all of the different users' needs. We feel that if we had to fully implement our design, that our group would have a very good chance at having a successful program that would meet all potential user requirements, and that each user type would be satisfied with their overall user experience.